Hello and welcome back. So I'm here with an update, and of course it's been a week full of news, full of updates, and there have been a couple of stories that have jumped out to me. They've really stood out and I would like to share them here. So of course yesterday we had the royal family having the state funeral for Queen Elizabeth II. And it has just stood out to so many people how Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan, they took center stage, and according to time.com, they said that they occupied highly visible spots at the state funeral despite their decision to step down from their positions as senior working members of the royal family. So I want to talk about all the coverage, especially that has been directed against the Sussexes, and a couple of things that we've seen over these couple of days that have left a lot of people with questions and have really put a new spotlight on what they have gone through, given it a whole new layer of complexity, and we're starting to realize that needs to be unpacked. So as we know, both of the Sussexes have gone into quite a lot of detail as to why they stood back from their roles and citing their mental health. Prince Harry, of course, saying that he chose to step them back. He was not willing to play, quote, the game, as he put it. Everyone yesterday, a lot of commentary online watching the Duke and Duchess of Sussex conducting themselves, have spoken over and over again that they have carried themselves with courage, with poise, with strength, with grace, with dignity, and so much grace under what they have been going through, the spotlight that has been on them, the criticism in some sections of the media, and of course, even some of the vitriol that has been directed, especially against Meghan. And of course, yesterday they stepped out. Meghan, she has such understated elegance and class that she just has. People commented on how she stood out even with minimal makeup, jewelry, and a lot of moments that were captured between her and Prince Harry that I think shall be spoken of in years to come. And it is quite obvious that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, they stood out in that occasion. And there was just so many memorable moments between them that I think are historic. Even as the whole world was focusing on the monarch's funeral and people calling it a historical moment in time, Prince Harry and Meghan, they gave us so many moments that I think are so stand out and will live on in people's hearts and minds amongst so many things that happened in these days. So, as I said before, a couple of articles on the coverage concerning the Sussexes have stood out to me, and I want to give you some of the highlights. So there was an article that stood out to me from the independent.co.uk that said this: when all eyes were meant to be on the Queen, most were on Meghan Markle. So that's how she titles it. And this part in the article really stood out to me. She said this, and I'm paraphrasing. She said that she had to turn away from Twitter that morning. She said, "It is, after all, every journalist's go-to for post-match analysis," in quotes. And that includes the poignant pomp and ceremony of Queen Elizabeth being laid to rest. But because of the vile hatred and bile being spewed in the direction of Meghan, she had to log off. So she says this: someone wrote and said, quote, "It's clear she's playing a game," speaking of Meghan, and went on to say, "It's time we banned Meghan Markle from entering the UK." And another one said, "Harry married Meghan Markle in haste and the cracks are already evident," end quote. And she quips and says, this person wrote this having apparently not noticed the couple holding hands just days ago as they left Westminster Hall service honoring the Queen. So she goes on to talk about how people were talking about Meghan being, quote, an actor, and someone declaring that Meghan was, quote, a fish out of water in her interactions with other members of the royal family. And the gossip, especially those who have said that Meghan bullied Charlotte, which of course we know is not true. And the writer of this article says that she was shocked about the idle gossip about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, how some were highlighting the second row that they sat on during the funeral, while others sat in the front row. And also how some people, one newspaper declared that Meghan's funeral outfit was a, quote, attempt to ingratiate herself, in quotes, with the royals. As though wearing black, she goes on to say, at a memorial were something new and different. She also talked about Dan Wooten's interview with Tom Bower Yes, she says, that same Dan Wooten, who was mocked for his, quote, performative mourning after asking a friend to film him poignantly laying flowers at the Queen's memorial. And someone else said that it took him 4 takes to get the best side of him. So Dan Wooten says this of Meghan. He declared, quote, the only person that Meghan, I think at the moment is crying for is herself, certainly not the Queen, end quote. She also went on to talk about how Piers Morgan saw fit to criticize Meghan for attending the funeral in the first place, saying this, quote, when I see her at these events this week, I think a lot of British people find it very hard to stomach because they think, well, you made the Queen's life so difficult the last 2 years of her life, end quote, he told Fox News. And this echoed a journalist called Petronella Wyatt, who tweeted and said, quote, may God forgive Harry and Meghan for causing the Queen so much pain, for I never shall, end quote. So the author of this article says that she was not the only one to notice the savage outpouring of vitriol against Meghan. One political commentator tweeted, quote, Meghan Markle isn't perfect, nor is Prince Harry, although he put his life on the line for his country and stood up for people who struggle with their mental health. But the nastiness and viciousness directed at her and Harry come from a very dark place. Racism is rife, end quote. Others agreed and rightly called it out. And the article concludes and says, Meghan, meanwhile, rose to none of it. Instead, she was the very picture of grace and elegance, maintaining perfect composure and playing a supportive role at her husband's side. Prince Harry, who has recently lost his grandmother. She was everything anyone could have expected of her. No different to Kate, no different to Camilla. She also went on to talk about how some people talked about Meghan's iconic outfit. And one tweeter said, quote, no royal besides Princess Diana has ever looked this iconic, end quote. Her black cape, gloves, and hat were perfectly pitched to the proceedings. She even wore earrings gifted to her by the Queen. Her mourning, too, was understated, confined to a simple wiping away of tears as she joined other members of the royal family outside Westminster Abbey following the service. Yet the baying hounds came for her. And this is a poignant end to this article. She writes and says, if Queen Elizabeth's funeral is to forever be a source of British pride, then let the public treatment of Meghan Markle be our shame. We have absolutely nothing to be proud of. So there's another article here by kqed.com. They write and also talk about this and say this. The most confounding aspect is the way Meghan has been put under the microscope by the press and public alike all week, despite not putting a foot wrong. The scrutiny is especially astounding when one considers how quietly Andrew has been reintegrated into royal procedures. In case you need a refresher, Meghan's controversies include speaking out about racism within the royal ranks, suing a prominent British newspaper for invasion of privacy, and winning, and moving back to the US with her husband for the sake of her mental health. And by the way, I would like to interject you and say that it is Prince Harry who moved them back. No, and that term Megxit, he spoke about it and said it's rooted in misogyny and, a couple of other things as well. The article goes on to say, meanwhile, Andrew, on the other hand, was stripped of his titles and removed from public duties as he battled a case brought by Virginia Giuffre. And we all know that story and the horrible allegations that brought so much disgrace on the royal family, causing him to settle with Giuffre out of court. He is reported to have avoided a trial by paying her an estimated $16 million. But the article goes on to say, yet this week, as Andrew stepped back into the public eye, it's Meghan who has inspired the most scrutiny and criticism in the days leading up to the funeral, and I'll even go and say during it. For much of the UK media coverage has been primarily concerned with presenting the remaining royal family members as putting on a united front out of respect for the Queen. That means both television and print media has actively avoided discussing Andrew's legal and reputational woes, except to report the arrest of a Scot who dared heckle him during the procession in Edinburgh. So the article goes on to say something more insidious is at play in the tabloids, however. Search the Daily Mail website for stories about Andrew, and general funeral coverage pops up. Conduct the same search for Meghan, and alongside that same funeral coverage, a wealth of other articles seek to paint her in a very specific negative light. There's analysis of Meghan crying at the funeral, while Kate is presented as the, quote, picture of poise. There are several stories about Harry and Meghan being uninvited to the Buckingham Palace state reception. Worst of all, there are a series of articles bending over backward to report other people's criticisms of Meghan. And the article gives a couple of headlines. Quote, Australian Senator brands Meghan Markle a, quote, horrible human with a, quote, terrible influence on Prince Harry, end quote, and declares that they are, quote, awful, revolting people in an extraordinarily scathing live TV rant, end quote. And another headline says this, quote, they say the cause of death was Meghan Markle's podcast. Bill Maher takes jab at Meghan's Archetypes podcast, end quote. And they also go on to talk about how another headline says Meghan's new favorite magazine, The Cut, launches vicious attack on father-in-law King Charles for being a big fussy baby and jerk to his staff as he mourns loss of beloved mother Queen Elizabeth II, end quote. And all this is second-hand coverage. The methodology, according to this article, they says that this serves as a clever way to paint Meghan in a bad light without the Daily Mail's writers being directly responsible for the nasty things being said. So it's second-hand coverage. Meanwhile, no such coverage has been published on Andrew. This article goes on to highlight there's been a hashtag called Meghan Go Home. And the hashtag started after Meghan accompanied Harry, William, and Kate to greet mourners. Had Meghan not accompanied her husband in this task, this article says, she would likely have been accused of disregarding the feelings of the British public and disrespecting the Queen. Showing up and doing her duty, unfortunately, did not mean she fared any better. They also go on to talk about how the younger people greeted Meghan warmly, but we all know that one moment that was highlighted, the woman who refused to shake hands with Meghan. So this article speculates as to why Meghan is a pariah. They say that, could it be race? They say they don't think so. They think that the fact is that she is an American. And she says this, that though commoners have been allowed to marry into the UK, they usually are British and have been groomed to understand and revere every aspect of royal life. Meghan had no such lifelong training, and the royalists of Britain know it and resent it. That's their speculation. But the article goes on to say this. The truth of the matter is that the UK public is willing to live with, quote, royal overlords only so long as the people at the top of that hierarchy are willing to keep their mouths shut and play the game. Part of that game, as every woman who's married into the Windsor family could tell you, is putting up with bullying from both the press and sometimes the public. Kate, for example, endured a decade of mockery. She silently withstood that hardship and humiliation and is now talked about only in the most glowing of terms. It goes on to say that Catherine, who now is the Princess of Wales, put her time in and she was rewarded. But the article goes on to say when Meghan was unwilling to put up with such treatment, a hazing of sorts, her fate was sealed. So that's their conjecture. So, it has a lot of layers. And I think Prince Harry has spoken on this before in his interview, and he says that he does not believe it's the British public. It's segments of the press. So isn't that quite an interesting read? And from both sides of it. One is a UK outlet and the other one is a US outlet. So it does show that a lot of people have been watching the treatment of the Sussexes this time around and Meghan. And it has not escaped a few of us that in such a time when they should have been focusing on honoring the memory of Queen Elizabeth, her dignity, her life service for all the years in her role as monarch, we saw this other strange facet, whether it was in coverage, whether it was how the Sussexes were treated in this time. How could the press make so much time for Meghan when the queen of their own country needed that focus? It just does not make sense. And also what we saw, the double standard with Prince Harry, how there was all that focus on his uniform, as we saw that the other members of the royal family who donned their military garb got under the microscope because a lot of people felt that it was not right to have an exemption made for Andrew to wear his before even Harry was considered. Did that make sense to a lot of people? I don't think it did. And the British royal family got quite a bit of criticism on that. It's ironic to see that Prince Harry could be held back from wearing his military uniform and consideration be given first to Andrew. That just stunk to high heaven. And it's interesting once again because are the only members of the royal family to have served in a war zone. We know that Andrew has brought a level of disgrace to that royal family that needs more spotlight. It seemed that it was being disproportionately put back on Harry. And you know what? People pointed out the fact that Harry is a vet. He's done so much for the military community. And he was on the front line, you know. You can talk about Charles and William, who have also been in the military. They were never close to combat. Harry served on the front lines. He was serving in his military capacity for 10 years, you know, 2 tours in Afghanistan. And he was not even given that consideration. He was to don a suit and tie for the whole time. It was only when the backlash just grew too much that they allowed him to have his military garb for the vigil. So there's that again. Once again, people pointed out there's a double standard against the Sussexes that has brought such disgrace. So the way the Sussexes have been covered, it's not a source of pride to those who chose to do it that way. It should be a source for them to sit down and look within and figure out why. Not only those in segments of the press, but also people on social media. Why the vitriol and the hatred of Meghan? Why choose to have it towards her, who hasn't done or been accused of doing anything even half as disgraceful as that which other members of the family there, people who claim they did not sweat, got. So it does take quite a bit of introspection. And when you think about how some people have also rejoiced in Harry and Meghan being, quote, put in their place, whatever that means, why would this family want the world to see them being so petty on such a big stage? That's not a source of pride to the royal family in the UK. A lot of people saw these happenings and were not impressed at all. The British royal family need to remember, and the press, the establishment, in fact, that if they are to have continued sway and that soft power that they speak of internationally and especially in the Commonwealth nations, who I think are about 60% or 70% people of color, then that's not the way to go about it. And I would like to remind them that big doors swing on very small hinges. They could think that they are putting down people who they perceive as dismissible, but that could come back in a torrent that they could not even fathom. It's like sowing the wind and reaping the whirlwind. Remember that saying? So let's see how that goes forward. But I think, once again, people all over, and I think the decent public in the UK need to call this out. We've seen the establishment at work. Princess Diana spoke about it, that she said that people in that establishment did not want her to be queen. They saw her as a non-starter. And we know how that hounding can work, how it works in concert with segments of the media, with mouthpieces and talking heads and those who wield any type of power, and on and on. And we just thank God that these days there's social media. We can all call it out when we see it happening, and I just thank God for that. So thank you, by the way, all of you who do take the time online to speak out when you see things going wrong against the Sussexes, and we're just going to continue to pray for them. So I just wanted to share this with you. I would like to know your thoughts about all of this. But once again, we are so happy that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have each other. We love to see them holding hands, and other leaders of other nations holding hands. And I love the fact that they are leaning on each other to get through the difficult emotions and times that they have been put through. And I'm happy that they get to go back to a nice environment there in the US. And I bet they cannot wait to see their babies again. So once again, I just wanted to share this with you. It was lovely seeing the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, such a charismatic, beautiful couple together. They had so many beautiful and iconic and history-making moments, even the hand-holding. I love that as well. And there's going to be so much to discuss and put down in the history books concerning this couple. We long for their best and we pray for God to guide them. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as I speak of moments that will forever stand out, just watching Harry and Meghan looking at that coffin in one of those last moments and seeing Meghan crying. And it really does show how much she did have love and respect for the Queen. And there were moments where you saw Prince Harry as well, so heartbroken, and you know how much he loved his grandmother. It must hurt for them on so many levels, and also knowing that she was one of their strongest allies in that family. Of course, you know how much they will miss her. So there were just so many moments that just made you tear up. And another moment, by the way, that was just so beautiful, watching the end of the service with the man playing the bagpipes as well. It was just a great send-off for the Queen, and I wish that the royal family could have focused more on her and not on the petty side struggles and side battles that dominated the news feeds. It was a prayer that we all had for reconciliation. It shows the power of just saying, I'm sorry, and how far that can go. And I do wish it was different for Harry and Meghan, but we continue to pray for them. We pray for God to guide them. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you to all who watched this video. Thank you to my Patreon, PayPal, and membership supporters as well. Thank you, and a special shout out right now to 3 supporters of this channel. Thank you to Eldridge. Thank you so much for your long-time support for this channel. Thank you so very much. And thank you right now to Lydia Washington. Thank you for your love and your giving, and thank you so much for being one of the moderators here on YouTube. And thank you so much to you, Rochelle Cherry. I appreciate you so very much. And thank you to you, TCC Sun. I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you once again to all who give to this channel. I appreciate you. Those who like, comment, and share. I want to also say thank you. Thank you all for watching. Leave your thoughts on this below. I love you all, and keep you here for more updates, and I will catch you in the next one. Have a blessed one.